We're here. Welcome, welcome. We are back. It's Sew Together Tuesday. I'm so glad everybody is here. I think we managed to do it pretty well today. So far, so good. So thanks for being here. I'm Teresa Coates. I am the National Educator for Shannon Fabrics, and we are here for day 2 of making our cute little monster pillow. We yesterday we did a whole bunch of stuff. We'll go over that. Today we're going to finish it up. I'm very excited about it. We are simultaneously broadcasting on both YouTube and Facebook. So, hello to everyone who is joining me on both platforms. I'm really excited you're here. This is super, super fun. We have people answering comments in both, but if you have questions, please leave them in the comments. And if nobody else can answer them, they get sent on to me. I will happily answer any questions that you have throughout the show today. So, um, make sure I get everything taken care of. We need to make sure to share the video. So we did it yesterday, and you're going to want to share the video today as well. We're going to give away a kit every time we have one of these Sew Together Tuesdays. We give away a quilt kit. So make sure that you are sharing the video with your sewing friends so that they too can learn about sewing with Cuddle. And then we'll pick a winner at the end and give away a quilt kit. The pattern that we're using today is the Cuddle, I forgot it again already. Silly Cuddle Monster Pillow. There we go. It's a string of words. It's hard for me to remember. It's cute monster pillow. So that's what we're doing today. And that pattern is available on our blog, which the link for that is in the description here. It'll probably be in the comments as well. You can go to our blog at blog.shannonfabrics.com and you can find all sorts of information. All of our videos are there. So every week when we do these Sew Together Tuesday videos, the blog has those videos available there. They're also available on YouTube afterward. So however you want to catch them, if you go to the blog and you subscribe to our subscribe to the blog, you'll get notifications whenever we get a post, and then we include all of the information, extra tips and all that stuff is in there too. So those are actually well worth subscribing to and getting those posts and going back and checking them when you're going to watch the video, because I always include extra little tips and stuff for you there. Okay, so if we don't have any questions, we'll just get started. Did we see anything come through I need to address? Okay. All right. Then we are good to go. So we're going to start off with doing this guy. And yesterday we did a whole bunch of stuff. Oh, let's talk about the things that we're going to need. So you're going to need the pattern. And like I told you, you can get the pattern from our blog post. Okay. You're also going to need the a 13-inch circle. And I'm using the Sewing Revolution 5x7 ruler, 5/7 ruler. Not sure how they call that one. It's a 13-inch ruler. It's great. We're also going to use the 505 spray from O'Deef, which is one of my favorites. Metler Metrocene polyester thread. Quilter's Dream Poly Request batting, which is the extra thin batting I like so much. Fairfield World's Polyfill polyester. Fiber filled by Annie Stiletto. Clover flower head pins because they're awesome. The Clover Wonder Clips, felt tip marker, micro serrated scissors. I have a couple of them. I'll show you the variety that I have and how I use them. Olfa rotary cutter, the Olfa self-healing cutting mat. You'll need a hand sewing needle for just a little bit of this. And then of course a Schmetz 9014 stretch needle. So some of these are real basics that we use every time. Some of them are a little bit different. So this is what we need for today. So if you've got the pattern, you're going to print it out and tackle that. All right. Go back to me. Okay. There we go. Like I can't get it back. Okay. So we've got all that taken care of. And now we can get back to where we were yesterday. So if you missed out on yesterday, you can go back and watch that video. It's available on Facebook as well on YouTube. Okay. So I've got my pattern. Just a brief recap. I took the pattern, I made a copy of it, and then I covered it all with packing tape because I go for the cheap and easy version here. It's just covered in tape, so it's a little bit more stable. You could copy it onto template plastic. You could do it onto cardstock, whatever you wanted to do. And then we made all of the pieces. So I'm just going to move this over here so it's a little easier to see. Okay, so we did the tongue, which was that pattern piece. We got the eyes and the teeth. All right, so those are all the pieces that we did yesterday, as well as the horns, which will be stuffed later. All right, so this is all the stuff we made yesterday. And then today we're going to do the mouth and then put it all together. All right, so I'm going to move this out of the way, my little Picasso-esque face. Okay, move this, and then we're going to do the mouth. So the mouth is this funky piece. And if we look at the pattern, it shows us how it goes onto the face. So I can see the kind of the direction that it's going. So basically all I did is sort of like tried to figure out which way it goes, and then I put an arrow on it. So I want the nap to run this direction when I put it on the face. So there's no arrows on it now, and I found that that was something that I actually wanted to do, was to keep my nap going the right way. And once I got that the mouth done, it was really hard to figure out like exactly how it was supposed to go on there. So this is my little tip, is to draw your directional arrow. Okay, so I've got the pattern, and then I'm going to use Dimple, the Cuddle Dimple, for his mouth. So I'm going to do the same thing I always do. I'm going to pet my fabric. It's going top to bottom, and I'm going to fold it in half this way. Okay, I'm going to put them together, right sides together, and I'm going to trace this guy out. Okay, and I saw that was a little cockeyed, super close on it. So it'll get moved just a little bit extra. And I'm going to go ahead and pin this together because I don't want it to slide. So I'm actually not going to sew this. I'm going to cut it. So if you saw me pin yesterday, I tend to pin it and then I sew around it. This one I'm actually going to cut, but I'm going to trace it all the way around with my Sharpie here. And then I'll cut it out both layers at a time. Okay, so I'm just going to trace around it. Like I said, I'm doing it on the reverse side. This way I like to do it because then you saw me trace yesterday on the front, and Hawk noted that I've really never done that before, and I don't very often. And I kind of showed you why. Normally I trace it on the back and then cut it out. So I'm going to put a pin right here. This is going to hold my two pieces together as I cut it out, and then I'll repin it as I'm going to sew it. Okay, so I've got my rotary cutter. I've got the new blade from Famore, which is a tungsten. Is that what it was? Super new, no, yeah, tungsten carbide. Is that what it says? So super nice blade that they just sent me that I've been trying out. And so far, I really love it. So let's see how it does on cutting this out. I still didn't, get my spinning rotary mat. So we're going to have to move this around a little bit. Okay. All right. So let's give this a shot. And I am cutting through both layers. So what I wanted to show you, this was the important part for today of showing you this, is so when you're working with dimple fabric, dimple is a little bit different than regular cuddle. So you can see how these little bits are they're pushed out. So what happens is normally lengthwise doesn't have a stretch, but because those circles sort of elongate, when I pull it, it seems like it has stretch. It has a lot of stretch this way, but it feels like it has, like pushed in stretch this direction. Okay. So now when I'm cutting, you'll see it'll push forward a lot more than it did when I was doing the blue cuddle yesterday. So what I'm going to do is do a little bit at a time until it starts to push. And then I just stop, let it sit out, and redo it. I'll do it again on this side. Oops. Get that flat again. Get my scraps out of the way. All right. And then I'll come down this side, and you'll see what I'm talking about here too. So it starts to push forward, and that's because it has a little bit of that stretch. So I just let it kind of relax and go back to where it was supposed to be. So it's a little bit like how we do the pinning, is that we try not to force it too much. All right. So now my pieces are pretty much the same, because what happens if you keep pushing that and you're pushing the top one forward a bunch, your sizes are going to become very different, and we don't want that to happen. So sort of push, relax, push, relax. I will sometimes cut 2 layers of fabric at the same time. Often when I'm working with cuddle, I just do one at a time, and that seems to be the safest way of doing it. So if I'm doing it, if I need something exactly the same size, I'm more likely to put the 2 layers together, but always put them right sides together, because then the fabric sort of grabs itself. If you do it where it's back to back, it will end up sliding a lot more. Okay, so there's a few tips for you. Okay, so I'm going to give this some flicks over here. My floor was pretty orange yesterday. It was pretty funny. I did vacuum it up though, so can't show you. Okay, get some of that off. All right, so now I've got my 2 pieces. And what I have to do, oh, look, they're still attached at the corner. That's pretty funny. Okay, so I'm going to put these back together, and I'm going to pin around this edge, because what we're going to do is we're going to sew around here, and then we're going to bind that top edge. It's a little bit funky way of constructing it, but it totally works. Okay. So I'm going to pin around this. Grab my pins here. And I'm going to pin in a few spots, and then I'll come back and pin again. So what I want to do is make sure that I am keeping my edges together. You saw how it wanted to stretch when I was cutting it, and it will do the same thing when I'm sewing it. So I'm going to pin quite a lot. Also, it's cuddle, so I pin quite a lot. I'm going to do the thing where we pin from the other side as well, just to keep it nice and flat. This seems to work well for making it not kind of curl up as I'm going to sew. All right. So pinning here about every inch or so. And this is going to be a little bit funky because it's stretchy with the dimple. It's extra stretchy with the dimple, and it's a curve. Okay. So this will be a little bit more, I'll be a little more careful when I sew it. Sometimes I can be really fast and sometimes I can't. So we're just going to go and sew this whole curve. You ready, huh?
All right.
All right. So let's come around. All right. So I've got my machine set up. I've got some orange thread. Let's see if I can wake it back up again. Did we turn it off? Oh, okay, got turned off somehow. All right, so I've got my orange thread in there. I got an orange bobbin. I'm doing that because we're going to turn this inside out, and we want to make sure that nothing shows in the seams. Okay, I will also use the orange when I stitch it down. Okay, so this one I'm going to use about a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm just going to back stitch straight. I've got my stretch needle in, okay, and I'm using the polyester thread. I'm going to put it at a 3 stitch length. And I'm just going to do a little straight stitch all the way around. Come on. Okay, and I'm just going to sew all the way around this little side. Oops. Okay, and sometimes it gets kind of bunched up back here. I don't know if you can see that. So I have to kind of get it out. So this is the digital dual feed on my crescendo, and it has a belt that comes back here, which works really well. If you have just a walking foot, that absolutely works. Recommend using a walking foot always. And gonna get my stiletto. But it sometimes can get a little bit bunched back there. So you want to make sure that you fix that before you get too far. Okay, so I'm just going to use my stiletto to kind of keep this down as it goes and make sure that it's laying nice and flat. Like I said, it's a little stretchy, so it'll want to kind of push forward a little. We don't really want that to happen. So if I can keep my fabric down as it goes underneath the foot, it's even easier. Okay, I need to get in here. Do a little back stitch and cut my thread. Okay, so now I've got a little mouth. Look how easy that was. Super simple. All right, so now comes the little bit harder part, and we're going to bind this guy. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off these little tails because they don't need to be there, and it just adds some extra bulk. So I'm going to trim these off, make sure this is folded down. Cut that off. Okay, and then what I need to do is make sure that I am putting this on the way that it's going to go on the face. So right now it's laying the right way. So this is my front and this is my back. This is about the only time that this direction thing becomes important, is because when we do the mouth, let me see if I can find, oh no, what did I do with it? Oh, there it is. Okay, so this is the one I did before. And yeah, I did not do it great. It's not terrible, but I wasn't careful of, I laid the nap on wrong is what I did. So it wants to lay this way, but it should be this way, but then the nap is running sideways. So that's wrong. Okay, so I cut it. So it should have been this way. Anyway, I cut it wrong with the nap of the fabric. And then I realized that this thing tends to happen. So I did it at both ends where it kind of puckers in and grabs it. So we're going to be extra careful on this second one that I did. I did it so that I did a smaller seam allowance. So that's what we'll do today, is more like a 3/8 or a little smaller seam allowance, and that gives more of this to turn around and catch. The nice thing is this is on the inside of the mouth, so even if I used it like this, you wouldn't be able to tell that it was messed up. But just be aware that these little corners tend to be a little weird. Okay, so it's just a little bit of checking to make sure we're going in the right direction. My nap is going the right way when it lays the right direction. Okay, so I hope that all made sense. How do you decide when you're going to cut and sew versus sew then cut on the trace line? Oh, somebody asked that. Sorry. So the question, yeah, obviously, when do I decide if I'm going to do it? It really kind of depends on the size of it. This was not a tight enough curve that I felt I needed to, versus this is a really tight curve. So this tight little corner here is a lot harder to get this to come around smoothly if I'm not sewing on a big piece of fabric. While this is a curve, it's very wide and easier to manage. Okay, so that's really the difference, is how tight that curve is. Good question. Okay, so we've got the mouth here, and then I'm going to bind it. So if you have never bound with Cuddle before, here is your little lesson on it. This is slightly different than we do otherwise, but kind of the same idea. So let me see if I can explain this the way that I want to. First, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip this a little bit so these stay where I want it to while I'm doing the other pinning. This is a little, I want to say tedious, and that's not really it, but I just have to be careful with it. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to put my fabric again, so that when I put this on here, it's going to come this direction, the nap will be in the right way. Okay, so I'm going to put this on here, and I'm going to start this up at the corner, but I'm going to start it with a little bit of a tail, and I'm going to pin it. And I'm going to pin another one right here. And we're going to pin these pretty close because we're sewing it around a curve. Okay. Then what I'm going to do, this is the tricky part here. All right. Is I'm going to take this and I'm going to wrap this around and repin it. And what that does is it brings it around in the corner and allows it to be a nice, even, a nice smooth corner. And we're going to do that the same way at the other end. It'll make more sense when I get it all finished. You'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm just going to pin all along this, trying to keep those edges even and my raw edge of the little binding strip. And that strip is, I want to say 1.5 by 14 or something. It's in the pattern. Somebody can find that and figure out what it is. It's a little piece. Okay, I'm going to show you something too, you guys, because this is, I have to pin it this way first. Can you see? Can you show back up just a little bit and show them how this curves up? You see how this curves? Okay, so when I was saying like I pin either side, this is what happens when I don't. So I'm going to pin this whole thing. You can see it totally curves. I'm going to pin the whole thing, and then I will reverse some of these pins so they come from the other side, and that'll make it lay flatter. So as I get this finished, you'll see how much it curves and why we need to sort of quell that before we start sewing. Okay, and this is probably every 1/2 inch or so that now that I'm pinning, so it's quite a bit closer. Okay, so I'm pin one more. And then I get to the end and I want to cut this tail off. So the tail is too long. So when you cut this big thing, please don't think that like that whole thing is supposed to go across, because it doesn't. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to curl this around and I'm going to pin it.
Could you baste that in before you added the binding?
Across the
Yeah.
orange part? Absolutely. You could totally baste that. Okay, so now you can see I've pulled this a little bit. It's a little bit funky. That's the way it's supposed to be. And that it curves here. So I'm going to just hold this and come from the other side and pin this. And you'll see how it'll start to lay a little bit flatter as we go. It'll be easier to get through the machine. This is particularly true of curves and especially circles. Okay, so now that whole thing will lay a little bit flatter. All right, so let's take this through, and I'm going to sew this at a little bit less than, I'm going to do about 3/8 or a little less, because what I really want is more of this to come around the back side to catch it down. I could also cut this wider, and that's the other option. I just choose to sew a smaller seam. All right, so let me get this in here. Lift up my foot and get it in just under 3/8. Okay, and I'm going to want to help it through, and you're probably going to want to too, because right there we've got 4 layers of Cuddle. And it's like, wait, I don't want to move. Okay, so we're going to sew this along here about 3/8. I'm just going to take the pins out as I go. going to sew along that whole thing. So I'm going to do a little repositioning back here again. Okay, make sure it's in the right place and laying flat. What happens is if it gets caught up too much, and this can happen with your walking foot too, is then it ends up not moving and then your stitch length gets really tiny. Okay, go over here. And then I'll cut my thread. All right. All right, so now I'm here. Hold on, I have to blow that off my machine. Okay, get my cuddle dust off there. I ended up having some, didn't clean that off very well. So it came off near my machine. Remember what I tell you guys, always clean it off? I forgot to do it. Okay, so now I've got my piece all basted on here, or all stitched on. Now I'm going to flip this so it comes up. So this corner where I sewed it is going to flip up like this. So now my corner is covered. So if you start it with the raw edge, you have a raw edge here that comes around and you'll see the orange. So this lets you hide that completely. Okay, so then I take this and I push it behind, and I'm actually going, this is what I did on my other one too, is because this is super bulky, right? I've got a bunch of stuff and it's in a weird shape. I'm just going to do this. Brunk. Bye. Okay, now it will be easier. I'm just going to cut that off because it's never going to be seen, and now it makes that, so this folds down much, much easier. All right, because it's not fighting past all of that stuff. So that's the way this whole thing is going to work, because this is going to come around to this side. So I'm going to do the same thing on this corner and cut that out, because this is a lot of bulk. Because once I pull this over, then I have the 4 layers plus 2 more. So I've got 6 layers. Then I'm going to pull this over, and then all of a sudden I've got 8 layers. Like, it's just too much cuddle. I always say there's never too much cuddle, but maybe there is on corners. Okay.
Yes.
That's the only time
Yes.
I'd be like, sometimes, yeah, it could be a little too much. So these scissors, I told you I'd tell you about my micro serrated. These are the Femore ones, which I like an awful lot. They're very comfortable handles, which I appreciate. Okay, so we're going to pull this up. This end is the same, and then this is going to get brought over. Okay, so I'm just going to pull this over, and I'm going to pin this because I want it to stay. Because then what we're going to do is we're going to stitch in the ditch here. So at this point, we're going to be sewing blindly. So I'm going to pull it over and feel that it's past where I'm at right here, and I'm going to stick a pin in. And in between here, I'm going to stick a little wonder clip. Okay, because what I really want to do, because sometimes I can get real fidgety with this, is I really just want to put pin, 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 but then it becomes a little bit difficult to actually sew it because there are a million pins in there. You can see that I do put the pin really in the seam, so in the ditch is where I put it. So that way when I look on the other side, so I'll pin from here, I'll pin it in the ditch, and then if I look on the other side, I can see that I've caught it. Okay, so this side, I'm gonna sew it, and this side is gonna be kind of ugly, and we can either trim it up and fix it or leave it. All right, but we're just gonna make sure that we're catching it all along the way. So try to get it nice and smooth here. And I'm gonna come around, and here's my corner. I'm gonna fold that in nice and tight. And I'm gonna pin that. Okay, and I will say that the corner parts were the hardest, and mostly because they want to flay out, and I don't want them to. They want to show, and I'm trying really hard not to get them to show. Okay, so there we go, all pinned, and so now we're going to stitch in the ditch all the way across here. These parts are very thick, so along these corners, so I'm going to like hand crank it and get those through. You could also, if you really wanted to, you could totally just like whip stitch from the back. So if your machine was having a hard time with those layers, you could absolutely whip stitch it from the back and it'd be fine. All right, so let's go over here. I'm going to change my foot, maybe. Well, I was going to, but what did I do with my little, there it is. It's hiding. I did clean out my machine yesterday. If you were watching, you saw there was a moment that had a little gross sound, and I cleaned my machine real well yesterday, and it needed it. So I think that was the problem. So we're gonna hope that today it's gonna get through without anything. All right, so this is my stitch in the ditch foot. which I particularly use for edge stitching. I love it for that, but we're going to use it for actually stitching in the ditch today. Okay, so I'm just doing a few stitches here to get it to sort of secure a little bit. And I'm going to try to push it forward. Okay, and I'm not going to force this because it's a lot of fabric. Okay, I'm just going to try to inch it along here, get that end secured, and then I can try to push it with my stiletto. Okay. Oh, and the other thing I want to do is bump my stitch up to 3.5. Okay, so I'm going to take that pin out because now that I'm going to start rolling, I don't actually want the pin anywhere near that because I definitely don't want to sew over it. Okay, so the same thing happens, and because I pinned in the ditch, I'm going to have to take them out as I go and be really careful. So I'm trying to stretch it a little bit to get it to come a little bit more in a straight line, but not move too much behind there. And we'll see what I did. We'll see how well I catch it in the back. The nice thing is, you know, nobody really looks back there. And if they do, they better be forgiven. Okay, come in here. Oh, I stitched that in orange. I was going to stitch it in blue. Oopsie. Uh-oh. So now you're really going to see the stitches on the back. Okay, so as much, oh, except never mind, it's Cuddle. Look at that, the orange
Poof
thread
gone.
is totally hiding. That's great. But you can see I caught it all the way along the edge here. Okay. That's pretty funny. So much for it being really important that it be blue. Okay, so I did catch it. You can see it's orange in there. Yeah, there's orange thread in there somewhere. But it's very deeply hidden. So if you're finicky, you could come along here and even this up. Okay. If you're like the rest of us, you'll leave it. That's the way I would want to do it, is just leave it. That's what I did on mine. Okay, but you can actually just knead it up there. All right, so that's the mouth.
I want to say hi to the folks from Italy over on YouTube. Nice to see you
Hello.
folks.
Hello. Thanks for joining us. It's so great. Okay, so now I've got my mouth done, and so we've got all of the pieces for the face done. So now we can put the face together. All right, so I'm gonna clean up my mess just a little bit because I want to lay it all out and see if we can get these placed correctly. I don't know what I did with my magnetic pin cushion. I'm too lazy to use the stabby one. All right, so I've got my pieces. I'm gonna get rid of that mouth because that was my trial. Remember yesterday I was telling you about my tongue trials there, and today I did the mouth ones. I try these different things and see if they'll work. They didn't work as well as I wanted to. All right, so now I've got my circle and I've got my basically map that's in the pattern. So this is the reverse side of the pattern pieces, and I'm just going to kind of lay it out basically like that, and we'll see how it works. All right, so I've got my eyeball, my other eyeball, and I've got teeth. My one tooth goes there. I've got the mouth. Okay, and then the tongue. And these all are going to get laid on here and then rearranged. I'm going to wait for the tongue, obviously, for last because we want to get that fairly straight. If you remember yesterday, I marked it so I know which way is which. I still petted it because it's a habit. Okay, there my eyes are going to go like this. Make sure everything is where I want it to be. Okay, let's see. Teeth are over here-ish. It's very much however you want to do it. Okay. This mouth, I think I did a bigger seam allowance on, I think I did a 1/4 inch on the other one. So this one is a little smaller. Okay. All right, how's that looking? Does that look right? And he's going to have a little tongue right here that'll flip flop out. I think that's pretty cute. Can you see it? You want me to turn it?
Yeah, there we go.
How's that? Is that pretty good? Maybe move his mouth down just a little. His teeth. Put his teeth there. How's that looking?
Better.
Do we agree? Thumbs up.
I think the tongue shouldn't be where the teeth are as much.
Let's see if we can get this here. Burp, burp.
That seems better.
Better?
There we go.
All right. There we go. Okay. It's pretty close. So,
Buddies.
yeah, they're going to be friends.
Yeah.
So they're not going to be exactly the same, and that's totally fine. Like, the point is that you can do whatever you want. And you could totally make different shapes and stuff too. Add more teeth, add no tongue, whatever you want to do. It's all up to you. So, this part and this part are going to be secondary. But first, we're going to applique all of these guys down. So, I'm going to try to do something here. So, I'm going to pin here. And I'm going to put a little pin here to say that's where I want the mouth to go. When I put it on, I want them to fit there. So the tongue I can figure out. So these guys I want to go here, and the eyes, I want them just a little closer together. How's that?
Yeah. As long as the pupils are straight across, right?
Yeah, or ish. Okay. All right. I think that's probably okay. Get that little white bit out of his eyes. So now, oh, look what I just did. I was like, oh, an extra pin. I'll take it out. Um, nope, you put that there for a reason, Teresa. Okay, so let me take this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray baste the back of some of these pieces and then put them back on. So I'm just covering this up because I'm going to spray baste over here. Okay, so I'm going to baste them over here and then put them back. So if you remember yesterday, we did a little thing where we can sort of swoop up and see where they go. I'm going to hold these down. Okay, so it sort of discolors it, for lack of a better word, where those go. Okay, so now I can see where they're supposed to be.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to come over here, and then I'm going to spray them with my 505 spray. Ta-da! Okay, spray them just a little bit, bring them back, and then put them carefully back where I wanted them to be, or as close to it as I can. All right, so then I'll pat those in place, get those stuck. So we'll do the same thing here. Okay, get the eyeballs marked. As I showed you, you can also do this with the stiletto. So we can also mark, show you this one. You can mark around it with the stiletto, and it'll sort of show a little mark in there that will totally disappear when we're done. Okay, so now I'm going to spray the back of these. Now I'm going to try to remember where the eyeballs went. Okay, so one there. And you can see I can put it down lightly. Okay, and I could figure it out, and then I could be like, no, I don't really like it there. I want it more here. Okay, I'm going to twist this one a little. So I can totally rearrange these. It's no problem. Even if I pat them down, they could still come off. But it is truly one of the things that I appreciate about the 505 spray is that it's not super sticky, and that it's, if I move it, it's not going to leave a bad residue on the fabric. So I can shift things around quite a bit. So now I've got the eyes and the teeth are stuck on there just with the basting spray. So now I need to applique them on. I use a blanket stitch, and we're going to do that again. You can absolutely use a straight stitch all the way around or a zigzag if you prefer. I'm going to do the blanket stitch because I like it. And that's what we're going to do. So let me switch out the thread because we definitely don't want the orange on this one. It will show in just the slightest way. You could use medium gray if that's what you've got. Probably almost all have white thread. So this is white Metler thread. It's their Metro Scene. I need to change that foot too. Do a little swip swapping here. Okay. Whoops. Oh no, here comes Teresa threading. Oh, look, it went right in. That's great. Okay. Whew.
I think it's that dark blue thread that was it's
The dark,
super rough.
yeah, the dark blue thread is hard, and it's because I can't see with that dark. the dark band on there. Okay, so I'm going to pop this guy off. Just say it's one of my favorite things about, there's a lot of favorite things about this machine, but this is one of them, is how easy it is to change that walking foot. All right, so now we got that. Let me change the bobbin too. So I'll pop that out, put in a white one. And that way when we're doing all of this applique, it's not going to show. When I switch, I'll switch it over to the orange for the mouth. I have some 505 spray on my fingers. I'll switch it over to the orange for the mouth, but only for the top, because the bottom can stay and it's absolutely fine. Okay. So now we're going to do this. Oh, I was going to switch it to the other one yesterday. Let's try that and see if that works better. Is this open toe one? That's the closed toe foot. So I had all three. So I'll show you just really quick. That's an open toe. This is a stitch in the ditch, which clearly just fell into the ditch. Okay. That's a stitch in the ditch. And this is the closed toe. Okay. So this works really well for seams. This works really well for top stitching. And this one works really well for applique. So being able to switch your feet around, I think, is super, super helpful. All right. So look how well we can see that now. All right. So I changed my stitch. We talked about this yesterday. Remember, it's 1.6 and I think 3. 1.6
and 3.
Okay. I think that was right. I'm going to put my needle down so it comes right by the edge of the fabric. I'm not using the soft or the water soluble stabilizer today, but you absolutely could. I'm just not. It does give a nicer edge to it. Okay, hold on. I'm not moving for some reason. Why am I not moving? I feel like I'm caught on something and I don't know what it is. Okay. There we go. So now we have a little tight curve, so I'm going to slow down and go around that. Okay, reposition slightly. Okay, and the basting spray will hold it all in place while I'm doing this. If you are afraid it's going to move, you can absolutely, like this tooth over here, you could totally just stab a pin in it and it will hold it where it's at. Okay, I haven't had too much of a problem with the spray moving on me, but I know that different machines work differently. Your walking foot might hit it differently and make it move. So. Okay, and I am going to sew across the bottom too, so that the whole thing is secure. Okay, now I'll lock my stitch, cut my thread, move on over. Okay, I'm going to start here. Hold on, I'm going to move that. This is a very interesting position to sew in.
What, with the camera in your way?
Yeah, like half my body's over to the left so I can stay out of the way. Okay. All right, we're just going to work our way around this. So you can see the straight ones are super easy, but then as we get around the curves, we just need to be a little more careful, do a little bit of shifting. This one popped up just a little. Where's my stiletto again?
By your foot on the ground.
Oh, it fell down.
Stabbed you.
Oh, it stabbed right into the flooring. That's great. All right.
That was me sucking air through my teeth earlier. I was so worried that
please don't land in. Please don't land in her foot. That is true. They are very sharp. They're great that way. Okay. So I'm just going to use this to hold it down as I move around. Make sure that I'm not popping it up at all. Can you move the camera back just a little? All right. And come around here. And I'll do the same thing. Secure my stitch. Cut my thread. And then we'll move to the other circles. So these guys, we already stitched these down yesterday. So we stitched those down with the stabilizer behind it. And now we have the batting behind it, which makes all of this a lot more stable. So that is the stabilizer we're using behind it. Okay, and I'm not going to back stitch at the beginning because I'm just going to come around and cover that up. So I leave that nice long tail. I'll trim all these tails off when we're done, but that will help me know where to get back to. Okay, and this thing just keeps rotating as we go. The smaller eye is going to be a little bit harder, I guess, just because it's a tighter curve, and those curves will definitely do a thing. So this, I'm going to sort of move that edge so I can see it. This is one thing that the water soluble is good for, is it'll sort of keep all those edges where we want them to be. It's one of the nice things about it. Okay. Otherwise, I just kind of manipulate it every once in a while. And as you can see, the needle, when it comes down, so it's coming down. Let's see if we can zoom in here real close. So that when the needle comes down, it's coming down right off the edge of the fabric. It goes right by it and then into it. Okay. So that's the way that the blanket stitch needs to work. I said I left the tail, and now I'm like, where is the tail? I think we might be back to it. Yeah. I think the tail got sucked down. Okay. So I'm going to secure a stitch because I don't see this popping up. Yeah, that's how I check it. All right. Now let's see from the back. I can tell. Did we get all the way around the circle? We did. Okay. Got all the way around. It's a pretty darn good circle. Happy with that one. All right. So now we'll go to the other eye. We'll try to actually leave a tail this time so I can show you what I'm talking about. Okay, we're going to start it so that it comes down. When it comes down, it's going to come right off the edge of it. And then I'm just going to head all the way around. Okay, and you could do, and like we were talking about yesterday with the stitch length, you can play with this. So what I would suggest that you do is that on your machine, because even though I can tell you the settings on my machine, on your machine, it will be different because all the machines are different. I have a applique sample that I did, and I did all the same stitches and the stitch lengths on both my Bernina and my Baby Lock, and they were different. So the exactness of 1.6 millimeters isn't true. It varies by machine. So make sure that you check it out on your machine, what you like, the look that you like, and then use those numbers. Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about the stiletto?
The stiletto is my favorite tool ever. So this is from By Annie. Lock my stitch here. Okay, and it's from By Annie. It is really, it's a great tool. So she does it because if you've ever done By Annie products, her patterns, she has these bags, and they're very thick because she uses the soft and stable. And so that was sort of my first clue that this might work well for cuddle. It has a really sharp little point here, and this is sandblasted for some roughness. So this is one of the things I like about it, is you can grab it and it sort of stays in the fabric. Okay, but I can also push through, and I can punch through the entire thing and hold it all together, which is awesome. And it really lets me manipulate the fabric a lot. So I can kind of, like if I come over here, I can stab it and move it, and I can hold it really well. So that helps me a lot. You saw when I'm moving this around, I can hold this where I want it to be. And if I'm using this open toe foot, I really have a lot of visibility, and I can make sure I'm not hitting this needle or this, the metal part that comes off of here. It's a great, great tool. They run around $20, and I have a few of them. They're fabulous for this and all sorts of things. If you're into like quilt making and tiny piecing, these are great for that too. They're just a wonderful sewing tool. They work fabulous with cuddle, but lots of other things as well. Okay, so now me trim off my little extra threads that stayed up top where they should have stayed. Okay, we've got the teeth down, and now I need to put the tongue in. Okay, so the tongue, I'm going to kind of look at my picture here and put my tongue. My teeth are further away than it is there. Oh, well. Okay, so I'm going to put my tongue here, and then it would flop over. It seems pretty good. Be a little more crooked. I think that's good. Are you okay with that, Hawk?
Yeah.
Thumbs up?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
There we go.
We'll move it just a little bit. All right. So the only thing I want to make sure, so when we put this on here, like the tongue shows up, but when it flips down, it flips the other direction. So make sure that you're putting it in the right way. That's kind of how we were talking about yesterday with the tongue, where you know which one is the top and bottom. This is the bottom. The stitching just looks differently than it does on the top. I think it looks nicer on the top. So let's stitch that down. I'm just going to use a big zigzag to get that in place. I'm going to stick with the white. If I wanted it to really hide, I would do a red thread or the orange. Go back to the orange thread. So this is my typical 5-5 zigzag that I do, and I save it on here because I use it a lot, but I'm going to do a 3 zigzag for this one because I want to hold it down pretty well. So I'm going to take my pin out, and I'm just going to go
Somebody's
across.
going to pick this pillow up by the tongue and swing it around.
Yes, they are. Exactly. So I'm just going to go across this a couple of times. I did it 3 times, lock my stitch, and take it out. So yeah, that's exactly what my thought is. If I give this to a kid, they are totally going to hold this and pull it. So if you want to secure it again with another stitch, you absolutely could. Yeah, that's gonna get some wear and tear. So this is hiding underneath in the mouth, so I'm not really gonna care that it's white on here. Also, you can, fluff things up and it sort of hides it more. Okay, so now that's stuck in there, and I'm gonna put the mouth on. Was that my mouth? Yes. Okay, so now I'm going to put the mouth on where I wanted it to be. I have to change the thread again. Okay, get that over there. Okay, and I'm going to try to make sure that when I stitch this down, I'm catching all of the blue underneath, that none of that is going to pop out this bottom side, because you can see it kind of comes into the orange a little, but when I stitch it, I just make sure I push that under. All right, and then I'm going to pull this down, and I'm going to pin it all the way across. Get this down in place. So if you wanted to, you could absolutely do this just with like the one piece and then top stitch it down all the way if you wanted to. This is kind of cute because it makes a little pocket, and then you could use this as like a tooth pillow or something. Because I know people do that. Oh, I need to change the thread again. Here we go, one more time. Okay, so this one, we put orange back in since we're top stitching with the orange. I'd like it to blend in a little bit better. The white, as we've seen, would probably hide just fine, but I'm going to change it just for good measure. Okay. Let's see if we can get that guy in there. All right.
Good job.
A little loop de loop. All right. I did it. Change the bobbin since I took it out. I wasn't going to, and then I just did it. Autopilot goes in. Okay. All right. So now we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to change this though. So I'm going to go back to my blanket stitch. That's what I want. And I'm going to keep it a little bit longer, and I'm just going to put it down to a 3.5. Okay. And I'm going to do a little stitch here. I've got to start moving my stiletto, because my stiletto, I can kind of push the fabric without pulling it and without really pushing it toward here. I can actually just stab this in here and sort of make it move. Okay, so I give it some tension on the back, and then I can use my stiletto to help move it right along. All right, so I'm gonna make sure that that's flat back there and keep going. So as I use my stiletto, I'll totally use this to hold it so that my seam is sort of turned down. I'll make sure that I'm not seeing the seam up top. Okay, so I want to hide that basically. Take my pins out as I go. And I can also keep it so that I make sure my seam is out but not showing. So we don't want it to curl in. As you noticed when we sewed it, I didn't trim the seam or anything. So it can sometimes want to curl in just a little bit. This isn't doing it at all. But I just want to make sure that that's pulled out and hidden along the edge. Okay. So this is another one that you could top stitch, or you could zigzag it if you wanted to. But I like the blanket stitch. I like the way it looks. Okay. And also, if I were doing this for a kid, I would probably come along back with my blue thread, and I would probably stitch down really well here, like in a triangle, because that's going to get some real wear and tear right there. Because you know they're going to pick it up by the mouth too, not just the tongue.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to lock this. Okay, so what time is it? We're doing okay. Let me show you what I mean with that. Let's see if I can show you here. So what I would do is, if I were making this for a kid, is I would come back here and I would stitch. Let's see if we can get this in the light. So what I would do is I would stitch here, here, and here. So I would just stitch that over. Okay. So that's what I would, if I were going to give it to a little one.
Just a little reinforcement.
Just a little reinforcement, mostly because kids are going to pick it up with this too and drag it around.
Gotcha.
But look at, there we go. Ta-da. Now he has a face. Okay, so now we're done. No, just kidding. We're not done. Now we get to put it together. So we have the orange thread in there, which is great. So the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to have a piece of fabric that you've cut out of the dimple that is not backed with the interfacing at all. Okay, it's just the dimple fabric. This is cut, I believe, 2 inches. I measured it yesterday. Yep, 2 inches by 40 inches. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew it in and then get it to match at the very end. Most of the time, I don't really like doing things like that. I like to have it measured out first, but this has a little bit more flexibility. It makes it really easy to do. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the bottom because that's where I want my seam to be. I'm going to see which way my nap goes. So I'm going to put it on so that the nap is running the same way this way. So when this comes around and is the gusset, it's going to be smooth that direction. Okay, so pet it this way. You can see the black lines on here. And this is why when I'm doing like applique cutouts, I'll always try to do it with a light fat or a light pen, or that air soluble one I had yesterday. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to clip this here, and then I'm going to actually start sewing over here. So I'm going to leave myself a little tail. When we get to the end, we'll have a little spot that we sew together. So for now, I'm just going to pin my way around this entire thing. This is super stretchy. So make sure that when you are laying it down, that you are just simply laying it down. You're not stretching it around the circle. You're just kind of laying it around it. It's one of our lucky pins.
Oh, yeah.
That's a super lucky one. It's so close to the middle. I don't know how that happened. Crazy. Okay. Come around and just going to pin it every, I don't know, 1.5 inches or so. It's not super important, like not important. It's super hard to get this to stay where it's supposed to be. So I don't need to pin it as much as in some things. Okay, and really that varies by, your machine and how it works for you. But this feels like someplace that I don't need to pin as much. If you wanted to, you could pin further apart and then clip it in between too. That would totally work. So let's do part of it like that. All right, I'll show you how that works. I don't use the Wonder Clips as much when I'm sewing. I tend to use them when I'm holding things together, and not as much when I'm sewing because I can't get it as close to the needle with the Wonder Clips. Okay, as I come around here, you're going to see I have an extra long tail, which is great. It's exactly what I wanted. Got a few more pins, a couple more clips. So I'm going to put this in here. And as I come around here, here is my tail that I'm going to leave. And I'm going to get to a point that I am also going to stop, and then we'll get those tails to match and then sew them in. So I'm going to put 2 pins right here, which is my personal sign to stop sewing. Okay. So now I've got this all the way around. You see I've got it pinned and clipped. Okay, all the way, partly pinned as much as I would normally do, and then this is Wonder clipped and pinned because it just depends on your sewing style. I'm going to start sewing here, so I'm going to leave a tail, and sew all the way around, and then we'll finish that together. All right. Okay. And I'm going to, again, switch my foot. This one to the closed toe. Okay. Oh, I almost unthreaded it on myself. That would have been a shame. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to stick it back in here and I'm going to sew it with about a 1/2 inch
We're on the
seam
blanket stitch.
allowance. Nope, we need to be on a straight stitch. So yes, we are on a blanket stitch, but let's switch it. Okay. I'm going to do it over to a 3.5. Is that what I've got it? 3.5. I'm going to do a little lock stitch. And then I'm just going to sew all the way around this. Grab my little stiletto. Got my load of pins over here. Try to get this to stay even. Okay, so as we're going around the circle, I just need to kind of keep an eye on that raw edge and make sure that they're staying together. And like I was saying, with the pointy end with the stiletto here, I can actually like stab through all the layers and hold it and kind of guide it through. And I can actually stab through, and I've never had it be any sort of an issue there, which is nice. Some stilettos, they don't really poke in, they just hold it down. And with the Cuddle, I found that it can be a little bit slippery and more movie.
Hey,
So
is there a reason you switched to? What was the reason you switched to the closed toe foot just now?
the reason I did is because when I use the open toe comes over to about here that's open. It's a really wide area. And what happens is this tends to kind of pull this direction and sometimes it'll pop out. So I have more control. It holds down more of the area flat and lets me keep a better seam. So the open toe lets me see more and this lets me control more. It's really the difference. Yeah. So this helps me keep a more consistent seam allowance. Because the fabric tends to curl, it can really get stuck up in there because it'll catch the toe here, which is irritating. So yeah, I've definitely figured out different methods for different things. All right, so we are almost back around to where I have the 2 pins, which is my stop sign. Okay, so I'm going to come back around here and pull my pins out. I'll do a little back stitch and cut my thread. Okay, then we're going to take it over here just real quick, and I'm going to figure out where these 2 end. So I'm going to put a pin here. If I were to sew it down, it would be there. And this one I would come around, I would sew it there. I'm just going to pin it through both layers. So this I know will fit now. Okay. So these 2 are pinned together. I'm going to take this pin out of the fabric and come here. So now I did a pretty good job of keeping those seam allowances even. So now what I need to do is just sew a straight line across here. Okay. I'm going to eyeball that, but you could absolutely mark it with your ruler if you wanted to. But I'm just going to sew right across, just like that. Okay. So you can see over to the side here, I've just folded this up, folded it in half to keep it as neat as possible because this definitely wants to try to fight you and do other things. But what we want is it to stay together. So like I said, it'll fight you. I'm going to put a pin across here so it can't move on me. And get that underneath there. Okay, so now I'll put my needle down. I will back stitch a little. Come on, there we go. And then I'm going to sew across. Because Cuddle is a knit fabric, it has a little bit of stretch to it, obviously, which means that if you do this a little bit short, it's better than doing it a little bit big because you can kind of stretch it to make it fit. Not saying you should cut it or stitch it too small, but if you do, that's easier than if you stitch it too big. Okay, make sure I'm not cutting my gusset at all. So just trim that seam allowance a little bit. And now I will pin this back in, excuse me, and stitch all the way around. Finish that up. Okay. With that, I'm going to pin the seam allowance open. And make sure I've got that all tacked down. All right, let's do this again. So I've got a little lever back here that you probably have on your machine too that lets me lift that foot up a little bit higher and kind of get it placed better. All right, so there we go. Now I will do a little back stitch, just a little one. Feed that as I go around. And now I'm going to try to keep that seam allowance open as I sew over it, just so it'll be flatter. It's less layers. Okay, on the other one, I did actually get a tiny pucker at the bottom. I'll see if I can find it. Let me see. When I was sewing it around, there it is. Is that it? Yeah, that's the little pucker right there. Right there. That little thing. It's a teeny tiny little pucker. It really didn't make any difference at all in how cute it is. Okay, so if you get a tiny little pucker in your seam allowance or in your gusset there, don't even worry about it. All right. So now we've gotten it all the way. Now we put the back on. Super duper easy. Okay. Oh, I was going to show you the other way of doing this too. Darn it. Okay. So the other way that you can do this, because we're going to leave a little hole and then have to hand sew it. Oh, you know what, you guys? I might just do this. I'm going to do this. Because what I want to show you is how you can just stuff it through this hole. Crazy. I know. She's unsewing what she just sewed. Yep. Okay. Okay. So what I'm doing is unsewing this. This is going to be our little gap for turning. Okay. Did that
Oh.
just blow your mind, Hawk?
Yeah.
It's never surprised. Like, she what? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pin this at the bottom. And I'm going to pin these two right next to each other.
Where's the arrow on that for the nap?
Oh, it's on the back of this one. Because look at that, I have two. It's like one of those fancy baking shows. Except that's the unprepared one right there. So this is the raw one that I picked up. All right. So now I'm just going to basically clip it,
And we haven't
and
put the horns
then
in yet.
no, we put the horns in after we're done. Okay, let me grab all
Right.
this stuff over here and throw it onto the table.
Okay.
All right. Sorry, reach is difficult in here. So I'm just going to clip this just a little bit because I want to see if it'll work or if I have to readjust things to make it fit. And if I clip it, it's a lot easier to move where I thought the center was. Okay, that seems to be working. So let me clip around the other side and then I'll go ahead and pin it every other. And probably readjust those wonder clips just a little bit. But this way I can kind of test it out without doing all the extra pinning. Okay, all right. See if we had any other questions. Doesn't look like it. All right, let me know if you have any questions. I will happily answer them. Okay, so now I have a little bit of a gap. So what I realize is that I have to feed this in a little bit differently. Okay, so I'm gonna, oops. So I'm gonna pin this, and then I'm just gonna sort of loosen it up a little bit as I go. Okay, so what I need is for it to fit a little bit better, which I can do. And then I'll start pinning. Okay, so that way I can actually fit this in and I don't have to repin a whole lot because I just use the clips. So you can see how quickly that goes away. All right, it's really not hard. Okay, so now we're back. I can do this, and now I can clip every other. So while it seemed like we were way off, you could see it actually feeds in pretty quickly and will ease in without a problem. So don't ever panic. Also, if you get little puckers in places, like I said, it's no biggie. The Cuddle is amazing at hiding your mistakes, my mistakes, all of our mistakes. Okay. And so I'm pinning it from the other side so I can make sure that these match because you can see it wants to pull away. So I'm going to just pin from both sides to make sure that it's going to be nice and even as I sew around this. Okay. The other thing is that this curls a little bit, and that's because I was playing with it a lot. So it tends to want to curl just a tiny bit, but we're okay. All right, so now we're going to take this back over and sew all the way around in this circle. I'm going to sew it from this side so that I can make sure and not catch any of this front that I already sewed, because I only want to sew this. That's the only reason I'm sewing it from this side. All right, I'm going to do the same thing, stick it in here, and then I'm just going to sew all the way around. Okay. My handy dandy stiletto, of course, so I can keep those edges nice and even after I take the pins out. I try to leave the pins in as long as I possibly can, but not so over them ever. Okay, and that stiletto here helps me, as you can see, keep the fabric together. So once I let the pin out, I'm still holding it where I want it to be, and I'm not going to lose control over it. Because it definitely, there's always a thing that people talk about how Cuddle has a minky in general has a mind of its own, and it really does. So we just have to kind of corral it and make sure it goes where we want it to. So I can see this is pushing up a little bit, and that may be from how I pinned it. So all I'm going to do as I see this pushing is I'm just going to hold this down and let it sort of take it and kind of feed it in. All right. So all we have to do, as soon as you start to see that happen, just force it to start easing in a little bit more. Don't let it build up. That's really where the problem comes in. So almost back around. And you can see I just sort of push it underneath the foot, and that seems to work really, really well in keeping it flat and not letting those, yeah, just the extra bits build up. Because the Cuddle dimple has a little bit of that extra stretch, it really can pucker a little bit more on you, at least build up that push. So just make sure that you're keeping it in check. Okay, so now we'll come around, we're back over, back stitch just a little, cut my thread. Okay, so now I got to find my opening that I left. Here it is, the little bitty guy. We'll see if this worked. It worked last time. There we go. Okay. I think I had a little bigger seam allowance last time. There we go. Let me take it from the other side. Smaller seam allowance? Is that what I mean? Yeah, it was a smaller seam allowance, bigger hole. Like, can she do it? Yes. Just might take a little while, longer than I wanted it to. Okay. Definitely was a bigger hole I left last time. What's the difference? I don't know. Because this is exactly how I did it on the other one that I just made. We'll do this little twist and pull thing. The hardest part here is going to be the tongue, because the tongue has some body to it. Okay. We'll twist and tug and twist and tug. The other thing is that I just want to get my fingers in there and I can't. Is the extra batting around the seam allowance will add bulk to it. Come on, little guy. It's going to get to a part that's just going to pop out. Okay, guys, I need you like root for me.
We're cheering.
Okay, good. I'm like, is it going to come out? It did the other day just fine. Oh, nope, there weren't the stitches. You heard that? That's pretty exciting. If you pull hard enough, you will break polyester thread. There we go. Just needed a little bit of oomph. Okay. Whew. Okay. So maybe the hole in the side is easier. This is definitely, I definitely took a bigger seam allowance this time than I did last time. See the difference?
Oh yeah.
It's a much bigger one.
Inch.
Yeah. So last time I did it smaller, and that made it much easier to get through there. So if you're going to do this method of leaving the hole here, do a smaller seam allowance. Okay. There was a lesson learned for all of us there. That was great. Okay. So this, I'm going to have to restitch. I think I'll have to just do it by hand, because that'll be just a pain in my rear. All right, I'll do that off screen later. if you've watched Sew Together Tuesdays very much, usually like I'll be like, I'm gonna finish that later. I'll post it. Oh, I'll post it later on I Love Cuddle, which I didn't tell you guys about yesterday. So I Love Cuddle is our consumer group, and it's really great. So if you have not joined us there, it's a wonderful little group full of people who love sewing with Cuddle too. All right, so now we're here, and I am going to stuff it just a little bit. So I've got my handy dandy bag that my friend Jackie made for me, and I've got it full of fiberfill today because that's what I needed, was something to put fiberfill in. So it's in my bag. Okay, so I'm just going to stuff this here. This is the regular polyfill, which would come in this package. I'm gonna move that over there so you can see it. You can move it around as needed. Okay, that's just the standard polyfill that you would find at most stores. I like the Royal Silk version of their polyfill a lot, but for this project, the regular polyfill works really well because we've done that batting behind the face and on the back of it. It will hold. It'll hold the polyester or the fiber fill so that it is still smooth. I like the Royal Silk because it's a much smoother one. This is okay because we're using the batting. Okay, so we're just going to stuff a bunch in here. This really fast. Kind of spread it apart, shove it in, then spread it apart more. So you'll see I'll like kind of shove it in, and then I end up doing this thing from the outside. I sort of smush it around and get it to be where I want it to be. Okay, and you're just going to fill this up as much as you need it to be filled. So this is definitely one of those, I don't know how much I will use, and it kind of varies. It depends if you want it flatter or you want it to have a little bit of oomph. Okay, the same with the gusset that goes around this side. Like I took a smaller seam allowance, you could literally make it, I mean, you could totally make it wider. So if you, instead of a 2-inch by 40-inch piece, you could make a 3-inch by 40-inch piece, and it would just be a deeper pillow. Okay, so that's totally an option too. You get out your frustrations with this. It's a little bit like kneading bread, you know? Okay, put a little bit more in there, and then I'll sew that up later.
Silly monster stress face.
Yeah, exactly. I just feel like that's actually like even finished, it's really good like that. You might just find me in my studio sometimes just massaging his face. Like, you're having a hard day? Yep, that's me having a hard day today. Just gonna massage the monster pillow. Okay. All right, we're gonna get that in there.
I see a monster pillow flying across the
Yeah.
studio. Yeah.
Yeah. That'll be okay. So we'll get that all nice and smooth. Okay. Need to take the lint roller to that. Get all that stuff off. There, I think almost there. Almost there. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to leave that hole at the bottom for right now because I really want to show you the horns. Okay, so there. I guess pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Get his tongue to flop down.
Yeah.
Okay, he's got a face. It's a good one. All right, so now, like, this is cute, but the thing that really like makes him a little extra special are these crazy little horns. So the horns we sewed yesterday. Let's see if I can find them real quick here. The horns we sewed yesterday. And you know what? I told them they needed a hand sewing needle, and I don't know that I have one. Oh no, there it is. Oh, good. Whew. I was worried it fell down on the job. Also, we talked about this before. Months ago, I lost a hand sewing needle, and I found it on my magnetic pin cushion underneath it recently. That was pretty funny. So you gotta be careful with this.
We lost it on camera, and it just disappeared.
So if anybody remembers that, I did finally find the needle. Yeah, that was so silly. All right, so I am just stuffing these with the polyfill to about this level. Okay, so they're full. They've got some body, but it's enough down that I've got some room here. What did I do with the other? Here it is. I'm gonna stuff that one, and then I'm gonna do this funky little thing that seemed to work really well. And I'm not sure if other people would do it the same way, but this worked for me, so I'm gonna show you how I did it. All right, so I've got my horns stuffed. Do we want them stuffed at about, obviously, the same capacity, right? So I've got my horns. Now I'm going to take my sewing needle and I'm going to thread it with some blue thread because I want it to match with the horns and not show it all. As I try to thread the end with no needle, with no eye. Hello. There we go. Okay, so I've got a nice long piece and I'm going to double it up. I can find the end. I'm just going to knot the end real quick. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is this. So basically what I'm doing, because what we're going to do is we're going to hand sew this on here. And I found it really difficult to try to hand sew this and not have the fluff keep falling out. So this is what I do is I take this, I'm going to stab this over here, my big needle right into kind of the seam allowance so that there's more thickness there and it doesn't pop out. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to pull this across just a little. Now I'm just going to work my way around in a circle. Just pulling this in the tiniest bit. Okay, it says to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and that's sort of what I'm going for, but I'm obviously not measuring. Okay, so then I bring this across here, and now I've got the corners all tucked in. Okay, so I'm just going to tie this off just a little bit. I don't care if it's knotted nicely, it doesn't need to be. And I'll leave that little tail. Okay, so there I've got it closed. So when I stitch it on, it's already, the seam allowance is already pulled under and I know where it's going to be. I don't have to wait for the stuff to fall out. So let me grab another bit of thread and then I'll show you how we stitch that on. Almost lost his needle in his eye. That would have been bad, huh? It'd been like that pin cushion that you have that you find needles in much later, only by stabbing yourself with them.
No.
Which I've done. Definitely opened old pin cushions too and then found lots of needles inside. It's kind of funny how they get lost in there, but that's how it happens. You stick it in and they just shove inside. Okay, I'm glad we didn't do that with Monster Face because then I couldn't have given it to anybody. That would have been bad. Sorry, there's a needle inside somewhere. Okay.
Oh, no.
All right, so now we've got it. Now we want to figure out basically where we want his horns to be. So does that seem about right?
Yeah.
Seems pretty close. All right, let's do that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in the center of this little gusset, and I'm going to line it up with his horn, and his horn comes this direction. Okay, so make sure that you get the horns so that they sort of face each other in that way. Okay, so now I've got his horn on here. I put the thread in this way around the seam allowance, and then I'm going to come back this way, and then I'm just going to stitch it down. If I can get my thread to move. Where is it doing that? There we go. Okay, so now I'm just going to grab some big stitches. If you are doing this for a little who is going to hold it by its horns, which they probably are, I'd probably go around this twice just to make sure that it was well tacked. Okay, but I'm just going to sort of follow along the seam, but just in front of it. And I'm just going to stitch this down. So if you need to, you can kind of, you could put a pin here and eyeball it. But what I'm doing is trying to get it so that when I come around to the other side, the center of the horn is going to land over there too. Okay, cuddle is so easy and forgiving that really I don't have to carefully measure to get it there. It's going to work out pretty well. So I just take a little bit bigger stitch, move it around, do what I feel like, and get it to go exactly where I want it to be. So now I can get this at the center basically of that little gusset and pull this nice and tight. I've got 2 layers of the thread here. You can see that I double threaded it, just did a long one and then brought it through twice. Okay, that's really important. And for these, especially polyester thread is super good. If you have something that you need to be held extra, extra well, buttonhole thread is super good for that too. We had talked about that recently on I Love Cuddle. So yeah, if you haven't joined us over there, like I said, it's a Facebook group. So if you're on Facebook, it's awesome. We have almost 2,000 people in there, and we get to ask all sorts of questions and show off our projects, and it's great. Okay, so some big stitches here. It's a little bit of a funky position for me. Sorry, guys. Okay. And you can see I'm just kind of stabbing it in somewhere along the way. I'm not measuring it. It says a half an inch in the pattern. I'm going to tell you again, it doesn't really matter. Okay, and as I come along here, I'm just going to make sure that this is going to come smoothly and land where I want it to. So go over that seam. And then I have one more stitch. So if I were going to give this to a little, I would go around this one more time. I'd probably knot it real good and then go around it one more time, just so that they couldn't accidentally pull the horns off. Okay. See if I can get that through one more. Pull it real nice and tight. And I'm going to do a little knot in here. See if we get that in the light. There we go. Pull it real tight. I'm going to knot it again. Okay. And then, okay, then I have the thread, and instead of cutting it right here, which sometimes we can cut it too close and then it unknots, I'm just going to stab it through here, and I'm going to pull it out over here somewhere. Okay, came out through his eyeball. It's pretty funny. Okay. And then that thread gets sucked back inside. Okay, now it's adhered pretty darn well. All right, so I'm going to finish up the other one, and then I will finish the bottom, and I will post it to I Love Cuddle. But if I had finished that, it would look like this. Ta-da! That's what it looks like, okay? So this is what your monster will turn out like. Super cute, super easy. If you have any more questions, please leave them. Please make sure that you join us for the I Love Cuddle group if you can. You can subscribe to our YouTube, and if you do, you'll get notifications when we go live. So make sure that you do that, as well as subscribing on Facebook, and you get notifications when we go live as well. There as well. Oh, there was a question. Would you ever use a pillow form or foam squares filling? You could use a pillow form, but it would be, you'd just have to get a circular one, which aren't as easy to find. That would be the right size, but you totally could use a pillow form. And the foam, you absolutely could. They have, I know Fairfield makes one that's like basically cut up foam bits, and that's a more solid one. You could stuff this more with the fiberfill and make it more solid as well. But yeah, the fiber or the foam little scraps would totally work. Yeah, absolutely. And that especially works because we've put the batting behind the face, that it gives it more stability. So any of the lumpiness that you would normally get from the polyfill won't happen because the batting is there. Okay, so that's really important. That's the same would apply for the foam bits, is that you wouldn't have any worry about them being lumpy on the outside of the cuddle. If you did it without batting, you absolutely would have some lumpiness from it though. So just be aware of that. All right, so I think that is it. We have a winner. So congratulations to Kimberly F. of Ohio. You have won a quilt kit. So please send us.
Ohio Thumb says happy winning.
Ohio Thumb. Yay. Hawk is from Ohio. So we love anything Ohio. So thank you so much. Please, so Kimberly, please send us a private message and give us your mailing address and your phone number, email, all of that good information, and we'll get a kit out to you right away. So thank you very much for joining us for Sew Together Tuesday. We'll be back next week. Forgot I was going to show you. So we'll be back next Tuesday. Should I put it on? Okay. So this is one that was really really popular on the I Love Cuddle group. So I made this for Hawk. So this is what we're doing next week. Okay. So come back then. Oh, I have my reading glasses on still. Okay. So it's this little hooded infinity scarf. Yes, hooded infinity scarf. See if I can get this up over my head. There we go. Look at, I'm ready for winter. Perfect. Okay, this is what we're going to make next week. I'm super excited. It's a pattern by Trish Newberry. So if you have not seen this pattern, we will include a link to it pretty soon. It'll be on the blog, but you can also look for it. It's the Darcy Hooded Infinity Scarf. And we'll be showing you how to make this one because it's still plenty of time to be cold this year. So we will be making this and I'll show you how to do it with Cuddle. So be super fun. Come back next week. We'll be here doing this, making fun things, and join us on the I Love Cuddle group. And until next week, happy sewing.